From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, good Sunday morning and welcome in. Faith is on assignment this week. The first week of the 2026 legislative session. It is now in the books. Two topics drew a lot of attention, and that was affordability and taxes. And while they will be far from the only topics under the Gold Dome, lawmakers are already indicating they will dominate the conversation as the session moves forward. Legislators stressed their interest in pocketbook issues, which means other topics may be on the back burner this session, at least for right now. Some Democrats say their voters are weary of GOP lawmakers' focus in past years on social issues like transgender sports restrictions.
Hopefully, again, we'll be able to stop with the culture wars and focus on keeping Georgians safe and delivering for the issues that they care about.
That's one Democrat's point of view. Republicans say voters will care about tax cuts. The party is wrangling what could be competing proposals to cut property taxes and income taxes. Some Republicans are hopeful that in an election year, lawmakers can do both.
Kitchen table pocketbook issues. Georgians are having a hard time, with the economy, buying groceries, affording rent, or buying a house. That's going to be our focus.
And carrying on with this early theme of pocketbook issues, Governor Kemp, he's promising Georgians additional tax relief. That happened Thursday during his final State of the State address as governor.
We keep your tax burden low. We budget conservatively and responsibly, and we ensure that state government is efficient with the dollars that you trust us with. And at the end of the day, if we have more than we need, we give it back to the people who actually earned it.
This will be a one-time rebate of $250 for single filers and $500 for married couples who file jointly. Kemp also announced an income tax rate cut, lowering the rate now paid from almost 5.2% to just below 5%. State employees could keep more cash in their pockets, too. The governor announced a $2,000 supplement for state employees that includes public safety officers and school teachers. Well, Governor Kemp, he did not talk about health care. He's opposed Medicaid expansion in lieu of his own program called Georgia Pathways. After the speech, Democrats seized on that.
We have been talking about expanding Medicaid year after year, and we know that the ACA subsidies have expired. There are cuts to Medicaid coming down to us from the federal government. That's a real challenge, and I'm surprised that it was not mentioned.
That was some Democratic criticism of the governor's State of the State address, but Democrats also cheered part of the governor's speech, announcing more than $300 million for a needs-based college scholarship to help lower-income high school students who may not qualify for the merit-based Hope Scholarship. The governor's speech capped a busy first week under the Gold Dome. Doug Richards from the 11 Alive Politics team will be covering the entire session for us between now and April. Earlier, Faith Jesse asked him what he took away from the State of the State.
When we heard Governor Kemp say that he was going to spend a couple $2 billion on I-75, improving the bottleneck down there, and then improving also the 316 between here and Athens, he said he's going to pay cash for that. Now, normally the state would finance that stuff and there'd be interest rates and stuff, but they've got so much money that they're going to pay cash for it, and they're still going to have like $10 billion in the bank in the surplus when they're done with that and with other things.
Doug, can you give us a sense of some key themes that might develop in the next few weeks?
Well, there are enough ambitious lawmakers here who are running for statewide office who are talking about tax cuts that there's no doubt that the legislature is going to get into cutting possibly the income tax, as well as they want to cut property taxes. One of the first committee hearings that they had here this week was a very wonky audit about tax breaks that are given to particular special interests, how much the state can save if they eliminate those. And if they eliminate those tax breaks, can they give those tax breaks to the taxpayers of Georgia and particularly the voters of Georgia?
As Doug points out, this is all happening in the start of an election year. Today we have two interviews with candidates for Georgia governor. You'll hear Faith's interview with Democrat Jeff Duncan. That's coming up in just a minute. But we start with Attorney General Chris Carr. He's a contender for the Republican nomination in a field that also includes Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. We talked with Carr this week about his campaign and his record. Legislative session has begun. What do you want to see the state legislature tackle this year?
Yeah, first I want to see property tax relief. And what the Speaker has done and what the House has come out with makes a lot of sense. It is what I'm hearing all across the state, whether I'm in Rabun County or I'm down in Thomas County. It's the oppressive nature of property taxes. So to be able to cap it, to talk about some of the ideas that we have to provide relief in a world where affordability is a big deal, I'd love to see that. Also want to continue to focus on crime and keeping people safe, focusing on keeping law enforcement safe. There's doxing that we still see online where they're going after law enforcement officers, focusing on mental health, focusing on kids. I love that we have banned cell phones in elementary and middle school. I'd like to see that go to high school as well.
One of your opponents in the race for governor, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, he's called for the elimination of the state income tax. Do you support that?
I support lowering the income tax, but his plan is based on unicorns and leprechauns and puppy dogs and a magic wand. That's not going to give taxpayers relief.
Why do you think eliminating the income tax wouldn't work?
Well, because there's a huge hole in the budget. And the only way you're going to be able to do is raise the tax burden, either taxes on the people of Georgia through sales tax or higher property tax, or like he's done, this state has been built on economic development. People have come here for jobs. They stayed here because of jobs. The first thing that the lieutenant governor said in an interview with you is he's going to eliminate all of the tax incentives that around this state provide relief and provide opportunity. This state has been built on agriculture, manufacturing, trade, and the military. We provide incentives in a responsible fashion in this state, and he wants to take that away. I think that's just wrong.
And now, to be clear, because he's not here in the interview to speak for himself, I think what he said in that conversation a few months ago was that he was looking at scaling back some of them. I don't think there were specifics about ripping them all up.
Yeah, taking away all of the corporate incentives that we've had that have built this state that we have done in a responsible fashion. Because what he said is basically Governor Kemp and Governor Deal and Governor Perdue and everybody else before him did it irresponsibly, and I disagree with him on that.
In 2023, your office handed down a number of indictments against dozens of protesters against the Public Safety Training Center. A judge recently threw out dozens of the RICO indictments in that case. What would you say to somebody who's watched this saga go on for years, sees the RICO charges get tossed out, and might think the case is not moving anywhere productive?
What I would say to them is, I have said from the beginning, we are going to hold responsible those who lit construction vehicles on fire, lit police cars on fire, and shot police officers. And we are going to do that. The legal process will play out. The judge has provided us with a certificate to appeal, which we will do. But substantively, you have a right in this nation and in this state to peacefully disagree with government. But political violence is not free speech, and I'm going to hold accountable in Georgia those that we call domestic terrorists, and we're going to use all the legal tools at our disposal to make sure that people are held accountable.
That is just part of our conversation. You can hear much more from Attorney General Chris Carr in our extended interview streaming right now on 11 Live Plus. We've got a lot to talk about. This is a great time to bring in our political roundtable. Today joining us, we have Republican strategist Deanna Harris. She serves as managing partner at Midnight Rider Consulting and is the former Republican nominee for Georgia House District 41. Also joining us today, and for the first time, is Democrat Deborah Shigley. She's a political commentator and a former candidate for Georgia State Senate. And joining us as well, Donnell Suggs, editor-in-chief at the Atlanta Voice. He's written for, among others, the Atlanta Business Chronicle, Atlanta Magazine, and ESPN's The Undefeated. Thank you all so much for joining us, as always. Donnell, I want to start with you here, and we'll go down the line on this because I'm curious for everybody's thoughts. But let's start with you. We just saw that interview with Chris Carr. He's one of 3 prominent statewide office holders running in this GOP primary for governor. What's it going to take for one of these Republicans to stand out among that pack?
I'm sadly to say it's going to take a viral moment because their name recognition is there. There's going to be some kind of moment that kind of makes you stand out because Chris Carr is qualified, but so is everyone else. So what is that moment? Right now, people can remember Brad Raffensperger's moment for standing up to Trump a couple of years ago.
You're talking in the wake of the 2020 election.
Yes, sir. But what other moment do the other ones have? Right now, I don't think they really have a viral moment. They have name recognition.
Let's get a Republican's perspective. Deanna, what do you think?
Well,
for me, as a previous person who worked in campaigns, I think funding and money is really what will matter in this point. Brad has a lot of money that he can spend on this election, and so does Bert. So Chris Carr really just has to work to do his fundraising and get his funds up, because, I mean, we've seen buku millions of dollars spent in these gubernatorial elections. Like, just look at, you know, Kemp versus Stacey, right?
The races have become very expensive.
Very.
And we have somebody who's fresh off not a gubernatorial campaign, but Deborah, you just a few months ago were on the ballot in a special election in State Senate District 21.
Yes.
Let's talk about, from a recent candidate's perspective, Deanna points to the importance of fundraising. How important is that?
Very important. I mean, it's not the only thing. I mean, we certainly have seen races and victories. The Public Service Commission, the Democrats won handily, and there was not a ton of money flowing into that race. But generally speaking, with these large statewide races, you're going to have to raise into the millions. I mean, Senator John Ossoff, for example, just released his $25 million haul that he's going into the Senate race with.
Let's talk about the kind of dual tracks of this 2026 year. We've got the election. We also have the start of the legislative session. There's going to have to be some lawmaking happening under the auspices of this election year. Deanna, you spend a lot of time at the Capitol. What are your first reactions to the big themes that are going to drive the conversation under the Gold Dome?
Like they said, affordability and taxes. So those are some of the things that they're really focused on. The House is really focused on property tax, and the Senate is really focused on income tax. So we'll see how that comes together and where they meet in the middle. I know that Kemp wants to kind of tackle both issues. So those two items are both in his budget, but he's also looking at improving the infrastructure throughout the metro city, which is really important too, something that I'm sure Mayor Dickers, Andre appreciates. And is probably going to be, surely going to be on the minds of many people, both Atlantans and people visiting for the World Cup coming up this summer, big events coming to Georgia. Deborah, let's get your thoughts on this. If everyone's talking about affordability, Democrats and Republicans, 30 seconds to you, is this going to be a situation where everybody comes together? Or is it going to be a situation where, as the session goes on, Democrats and Republicans are defining the issue and the solutions differently?
Well, there's very vast difference between what they want to do. As Deanna mentioned, property taxes, income taxes, those are two big proposals on the table. But we know there's only two things certain in life, and that is death and taxes. So the government is going to get their money somehow, which means in this case, they are going to probably dramatically, probably triple the sales tax, and that exactly cuts against the idea that it would be affordable. You're going to be raising the prices on everyday goods. So, of course, the Democrats are running on an affordability agenda. That includes, you know, affordable housing. That includes lowering costs in any way we can. But the Republicans control the House. The Republicans control the Senate, and they do control the governor's house.
And Deanna, I want to give you a chance to get a rebuttal here, and then Donnell, we'll start with you in the next block.
So I don't know if we have to raise the sales tax, because we have so many taxes that incentives that we give to large businesses and companies, and even with like the music and entertainment industries, right? Those are some of the things that we can cut back on, and that will supplement the budget, you know, versus charging the citizens.
And just because we're getting the wrap here, this is a good microcosm of the debate that's going to happen under the Gold Dome. Guys, we'll be right back after this. In a crowded field of Democratic candidates, Jeff Duncan argues he is the best choice to take on the Republican nominee in the fall. But the former Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia will have to win the May primary first. With affordability top of mind, Faith Jesse asked him about his plan and values as a Democrat.
Are you a Democrat because your values have changed, or because the Georgia GOP no longer wanted you in the party?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm a Democrat, proud Democrat, because my values have changed. I think I wake up every day as a proud Democrat because loving my neighbor is easier now. As a Republican, I couldn't love my neighbor if they didn't look like me, act like me, love like me, vote like me. It was a limiting factor, and I wake up now as a proud Democrat without those limitations. And certainly, you know, the solutions, I believe, rest in the Democratic Party at this point around health care, around education, around public safety, around foreign policy. So I am a proud Democrat.
We're hearing a lot of affordability. As you know, session just started this week in Georgia, and it seems like Republicans and Democrats both want this affordability issue to be resolved. They want to go about it different ways. What's your policy in place if you were able to get this seat when it comes to affordability?
Yeah, the only people that don't really seem to get the fact that Americans are worried about affordability is Donald Trump and the MAGA crowd. It doesn't feel like they understand how real this is for folks. Whether they're living check to check or own a business, the affordability crisis is hitting home in every household in the state. And one of the areas of opportunity for me is I want to use $1.7 billion of the $17 billion rainy day fund, call it a Jumpstart Fund, and reach into those families and those lives that need that one jumpstart to get back to work with affordable child care costs by better funding the CAPS program, by better funding the TANF program to be able to help those around the vicious cycle of poverty with transportation costs, with power costs, energy bills, be able to help soften some of those areas, but also to expand Medicaid. So many folks are waking up in a healthcare crisis. Almost everybody listening here is in the midst of a healthcare crisis. And so looking for opportunities to expand that. But we have to make real moves. The federal government is not on our side. They're not really interested in seeing people thrive in Georgia. And so we as a state government have to switch our focus away from just a select few to a majority of Georgians.
So are you saying that the power should really lie within the states because the federal government isn't doing what they need to do?
Well, if you're a kid that is used to getting a free and reduced lunch and no longer because Donald Trump decided to give tax breaks to billionaires and the SNAP program's been cut, then yes, we would reach in with the state government's funds and try to help reach those people where they're at. We have to do more as a state, unfortunately. The majority of our tax dollars go to the federal government, but Donald Trump has decided to declare war on the American people unless they waive their allegiance to him. And for me, that's the wrong way to go about it.
I mean, you were one of the first when you were a Republican to stand up to the president amid that January 6th insurrection that we saw. I want to ask you about the recent candidate forum that you spoke at in Savannah. You noted, and you also mentioned here, that the next governor would need to expand Medicaid and work with the General Assembly to do it. The General Assembly obviously dominated by Republicans that have not really been on board with the idea of expanding Medicaid. How would you do that?
Well, two things. One is if Jeff Duncan wins this race for governor, there'll be a number of seats, legislative seats, that flip. And so instead of seeing 100 Republicans and 80 Democrats in the state house, you'll see a much tighter majority start to soften up. So everything will be negotiable. I think a majority of Republicans know what the right thing to do is. I think they understand the fiscal effects of expanding Medicaid are actually helpful for Georgia. And also just doing the right thing of expanding Medicaid so folks don't have to show up to the hospital and decide whether or not they stay in the car and treat their own medical illnesses or go into the hospital and bankrupt themselves and their family. And so I think by presenting it that way, a majority of Republicans will agree.
Jeff Duncan is part of a crowded field of Democratic candidates for governor. The full conversation with Faith Jesse, that is streaming right now on 11 Alive Plus. Let's bring back in our political roundtable. And Donnell, let's start with you. We saw the interview with Republican candidate Chris Carr earlier. Now we saw an interview with Democratic candidate for governor Jeff Duncan. What is it going to take for a Democrat to emerge from an even bigger field on the Democratic side in this primary?
What we saw last week at the forum
in Savannah,
where all 7 candidates were there, all Democratic candidates were there, was that people were, I'm in the back of the room listening to voters, just regular folks, and they're enjoying the back and forth, but it wasn't a debate. So people have to like the candidates at this point now, because Jeff Duncan is new to them, to a lot of these folks. And
at least new as a Democrat.
As a Democrat. So a lot of the people in that room, they were asking me, who's that? And to even Keisha Lance Bottoms being the mayor of Atlanta doesn't necessarily speak to the entire Georgia. So a lot of these folks are just going to have to keep on getting in front of people and being likable for that matter. They talked a lot about how they like Jason Estevez and what he said, and Rural Woman, what she said. So I think you just have to get out and continue to keep on getting out these forums and debates and what have you long before May.
And all candidates who, if folks are watching the Georgia Vote, they've seen them on our show, and yes, we look forward to having more conversations with them. Deborah, you were a Democrat on the ballot not too long ago. I saw you nodding your head along a little bit as we watched some of that interview. What do you think is going to be the ultimately winning message for whichever Democrat emerges from this primary?
Well, affordability is obviously the big agenda item for Democrats this year, cutting cost of living in whatever way we can. And I'm really interested to see not just Jeff Duncan, but certainly Jason Estevez has put forth proposals about child care coverage and universal pre-K and all of these things that are real kitchen table issues that Georgians are struggling with right now.
Indiana, from a Republican's perspective, I'm sure you and your fellow Republican strategists are looking at this large field of Democrats running. Yeah. Is there a candidate that worries Democrats more than others? The Democrats think, oh boy, I hope they don't get the nomination because they're going to be hard to beat.
Republicans, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you know, former DeKalb County CEO has served statewide. And he's
That's Mike Thurmond.
Yes, and he is more of a middle of the road Democrat, right? And so that could worry Republicans, I do believe. But I think that former Senator Estevez is a rising star. He's been getting around the state, so he'll have his moment too, for sure. I think those are the top two in that competition for sure.
Voters are going to have a lot of choices on both the Republican and Democratic side. We're running out of time on the panel here, guys. Thank you very much. More of the Georgia Vote will be right back after this. Welcome back. Tomorrow is the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. It is a day to reflect on and salute the life and the legacy of the late civil rights icon. Dr. King's son is urging the nation to recommit to his father's message of justice and nonviolence. Martin Luther King III says honoring his father's legacy means more than remembering history. It means taking action today.
The universe moves forward. If you look at the axis, the earth is moving forward. There are individuals who are elected officials who are trying to move us backward to a day that's gone. And so we have to reject that, not in a violent way, but in a constructive and responsible way. And then we have to join the movement of moving forward to make a nation that serves all people.
That is just part of our Danielle Nottingham's interview with Martin Luther King III. You can watch her full interview right now on 11 Alive Plus. Now, several events are planned across the city to honor the civil rights leader on Monday. We have a list of those events on our website, 11alive.com. We'll be right back with our Voice of the Voter. Well, in the age of scrolling and digital media, this year our Voice of the Voter segments will reflect that. Our first digital Voice of the Voter is Charlinda Parker from Mableton.
My name is Charlinda Parker. I reside in Mableton, Georgia. I am 50% owner of the Tulatu brand, which includes my amazing product line called the Tulatu Collection and my all-natural nail salon located in West Midtown, along with my nonprofit, Sisters United of Atlanta, that I am so passionate about, giving back to my community. And in my opinion, the most pressing issue in Georgia politics right now is definitely health care. Everyone should have access to health care. One of the things I'm most concerned about is the cost of living. Nowadays, it costs to just go outside. I think politicians can listen to the people of the community. I am most optimistic and hopeful that whoever is elected, that they keep their promises and stay connected and committed to the people and the community.
Well, thanks for watching us today. We hope to see you here again next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.